Advance prep for the show. The real hero and star of the top 20. It is the light stick, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up. I am now a co-host of the top 20. Do I look like somebody who you would let build a house? I am the stupid. It's America's stinky butt. If you don't like this country, leave. What do you have to say, Stick?
Hard Rock Lunchbox.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome, listeners, to the Hard Rock Lunchbox. Of course, if you're watching on YouTube, welcome again, hopefully, to the top 20. It is a still very cold January 16th, 2025. I would like to draw your attention over my right shoulder, but for you at home, it's over my left shoulder. This is actually my right shoulder. I don't understand the whole image swapping thing, but nonetheless, if you take a gander that way, you will see that I have indeed done, hold on, advance prep for the show. And by advance prep, I mean not only my standard weekly nonsense of light housekeeping, but behold the light stick, right? The light stick. I've raised it up. Technically, it's on a shoebox. One could argue it's not high enough, but I wasn't ready to go 2 shoeboxes in to start the show. That's crazy, and nobody needs that kind of aggravation on a Thursday. But I also remembered to set it, so it goes off during the rhythm of my voice. So it kind of sounds, or it kind of seems like I'm in a weird Star Wars movie, not one of the good ones, but like the lights kind of like that. You see what I'm saying? So once again, for you playing at home, the real hero and star of the top 20 is back. It is the light stick, ladies and gentlemen. Give it up for the light stick. Now, I do make a lot of fun of Kaz because sometimes it's just funny, and I don't think he minds most of it, because usually I end up making fun, or not even making fun, I poke fun at how Kaz he is. Now, I happen to adore Kaz, and while I would argue that everybody should have their own Kaz, I believe there's enough of my Kaz to go around. But the thing that is signature about him is that he really does put thought into it. Now, one could argue whether or not that thought is well placed all the time, or like sometimes he'll miss the mark, but he really does put thought into a lot of what he does, and most of what he does. I think that's a fair assessment. I don't think he's very careless with anything. I think he does a lot of stuff with intention, which is a really good thing, especially in today's world, and I definitely notice it more and more. Because I will say that when I first got this, my first response was, what the F actually is that? And then he's like, you need it for your show. To be perfectly honest, I did not know I needed it for my show until I started playing with it. And now, no phrasing, but it does seem like the light stick is bringing in viewers. So, who? I mean, I was going to say who is the real star here, but like, I think that's obvious. And since it's going to be hurtful to me personally to know the answer, like, I am now a co-host of the top 20, I think you could say, without too much reservation. And I spent a lot of time in therapy working on acceptance, so this is going to be one of those things. So what do you have to say, Stick? Yeah, all of a sudden he doesn't have anything to say, so that's okay. I know this is blisteringly exciting radio, but trust me, it'll be worth tuning in for the top 20. Probably not. But I think it really could be. I think it really could be, because it's interesting to see the development, because I don't think this is the end game. This is not, the evolution, the last X-Men. Like, I think it's going to go higher. That would be, like, my opinion. Like, probably, like, a little bit, like, there. Like, it's here now. Like, it just go up there a little bit. But I do think the placement in front of the, I don't even know what that's called. Like a foundation pole? I don't know. Do I look like a contract? Do I look like somebody who you would let build a house? Of course not. Lincoln Logs. Lincoln Logs and wooden playgrounds are about the limit of my ability. So, anyway, that's neither here nor there. That is happening. This is happening. It's time for the top 20. All right, so let's get to some light housekeeping, because that's fun to do. So, Let me see, the top 20. Oh, yeah, last episode. The Return of the Light Stick. I could not recommend this video more. Top 20, it's on Strangerhood TV. Came out this morning around midnight or 1 o'clock. Check that out, and I talk about how it's my new overlord and how it's not flashing when I'm speaking, but rather I'm speaking when it's flashing. It is also super sensitive. As I was doing this setup, I realized that even a tap here was setting it up. Watch. It's definitely entertainment for the stupid, and in this particular case, I am the stupid, and that's okay. Also on the show, I was talking about walking the path and standing on principle, and I was talking about the glory hole vehicle, and the kind of disdain I have for the Cybertruck, pretty much all it represents, and of course the people that opt to drive them, because it's dick. You know, like, you remember, like, all those times you would see people, like, with cars, like, or as Shrek famously said when he pulled into Duloc with Donkey, and he's like, do you think he's compensating for something? Like, I probably have that. Let me just take a quick look. This sounds like something I would have. This definitely sounds like one of my bumpers. By the way, it's always funny to me. Oh, yeah, here it is. See, check it out. Watch. Ready, everybody?
So, that must be
Hard Rock Lunchbox.
That's the place.
Do you think maybe he's compensating for something?
Yeah, exactly that. Right, that's exactly what I mean. Shrek is almost always right anyway, but he's definitely right in this particular case. But yeah, I wasn't talking about the light stick again, although I definitely drifted back over there. It's really hard because it's going on the whole time, and I can see it in the monitor here, which is disturbing to say the least. But yeah, I was talking about people in the Cybertrucks and how it feels like they're compensating for something. So I had a couple things I was going to talk about today. I was going to talk a little bit about therapy because it was kind of funny. My last session this week, where I was actually given, I think, a compliment about the way that I can just start off a session in such a good mood, because that's generally how I approach things, and then eventually, like, I get really right into whatever the problem is. And he said I have an absolutely awesome way of doing that, and I was like, cool, compliment it is. Like, I'm gonna file that away. Don't get a lot of compliments these days, so that one's going on the board, on the fridge. I don't know if I told anybody this. I feel like I've said it out loud, but I don't know if it was here. But Noodle was complaining a couple of weeks ago about how he had to work on Emma, his daughter's project for school, and he was like gluing and painting stuff and all that other stuff. And I turned to Tony. I was like, he's going to be really, really upset if he gets below a C- on this thing. But then I said the converse of that is, of course, if he gets a B+ or higher, it's probably going to go on the wall behind his drums, and I'll just have to look at it all the time. I did suggest to him that if he got an A or better, he should send it to his former third grade teacher and just be like, see, and you thought I'd never amount to anything. And I told Noodle, I'm like, I bet he's crushing the third grade this time around, which is probably true. I don't know. Although, to be perfectly honest, Emma seems like the brighter of the two, but I haven't tested, like, maybe Noodle just doesn't test well. I don't know. So I was going to talk about that, but then fortunately, the MAGA world decided to give me a gift today. And I figured, yeah, I mean, I know I do try and stay off of politics because I don't like alienating listeners, but the reality of it is, at this point, I've alienated pretty much anybody I'm going to alienate. And that seems to be the way it works in the MAGA world. Like, you are not allowed to criticize the boss at all, ever. Otherwise, they just disown you. And a lot of people that used to listen to this show do not listen to this show anymore because I'm just so... And I'm not even anti-Trump, per se. Like, I never really even look at Trump as being the particular problem. I look at the people that support him as being the problem. And that is even more evidenced by what I have to talk about today. So, in Florida, which Jake Peralta once referred to as America's stinky butt, and I don't think he's wrong. I did happen to see that episode again last night. I have never seen a bad episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, by the way. If you haven't watched I could not recommend it more. Like, I really, really couldn't. It's on Netflix for the first 4 seasons, and then on Peacock streaming for the rest of them, and you could probably just find it anywhere. Besides, you can watch, like I did, an hour of Brooklyn Nine-Nine Cold Opens on YouTube, which is definitely a great way to spend your hour if you have it. But so Florida, right? Florida went 13 points for Trump this time out. It's a solidly red state. It's not even worth saving as a Democrat or an independent anymore. But a lot of the problems stem from this sort of blind loyalty to its leader, which I don't honestly know why it doesn't raise more red flags for your average independent and right-leaning Democrat, which I am getting more and more less Democrat all the time because I just don't like a lot of Democratic policies. I don't like the extreme left at all. I really take issue with it constantly. But I also speak to that as well, and I say why that's wrong. I do the same things on both sides. It's really not a political thing as much as it is a policy thing. And in this particular case, what's alarming me and sending up more red flags than I care to have is the simple fact that everybody seems to be coming forward and supporting Trump as opposed to supporting the office of the president, supporting the country, supporting the American people. And if you listen, even if you don't listen, if you pay any attention at all, you keep seeing these flags come up. And the thing that started it for me was a couple of days ago. I'll go further back. President Jimmy Carter, who was president before Ronald Reagan, so that kind of dates it like the end of the 70s, died at the age of 100. Now, people have argued that Jimmy Carter wasn't a particularly effective president. I'm not here to speak on that. I actually thought he did some good stuff. He was definitely president during a difficult time. I also happen to believe that Ronald Reagan was one of the worst presidents of the modern era, and that includes Trump's first term. And if you ever want to discuss that, you can message me on the DL, and we'll talk about why, because I've had that conversation many, many times. But Jimmy Carter died. He died at the age of 100, and I was saying he may not have been a particularly great president, but he was easily and arguably the greatest ex-president we have had in the modern era. The guy lived for humanitarian purposes. He built homes for vets and the American people. Like, that's what he did. He lived in a small reserve house in Georgia, and he was just like a funny grandpa. Like, even some of the eulogies that were given by his grandsons were like particularly touching, and anybody that's got an elder relative would find a lot of it funny because he had a phone, like an honest to God pick up and dial phone in his house for years, and then finally he decided to get a smartphone, and his grandson talks about how he got a call from him, and he's like, "Oh, hey, Papa, what's up? What's up?" And he was like, "Who is this?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's Jason or Jacob or whatever the kid's name was. Like, you just called me." He's like, "No, I don't think I did." But he said, "I was just trying to, like, sign into my phone or whatever." And so, like, as classic old people do, like, he just had no idea what he was doing and ended up calling his grandson, which I just find super endearing. But he died. He died less than 30 days ago. That's true. And that's inarguable, right? That's an actual fact on the ground. What's also inarguable is that not only is it customary to keep flags at half-mast after a former president dies, it is actually part of the United States flag code. It's the law, right? So a code is the law, right? Anybody that's had a problem with contractors in the town know that code is the law. If your house isn't up to code, you can't get a certificate of occupancy. It's the law. So it's customary and it's the law to have flags fly at half-mast. Well, Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican ball handler from Louisiana, decided that he was going to ignore that particular law. This is the Speaker of the goddamn House of the United States Representatives. He's decided to ignore the law, and he's going to let the flags fly full mast during Trump's inauguration, violating all custom, violating the law, and violating every sense of decency. He's doing this just to curry favor with the president-elect, which I understand. It doesn't make it any less, disgusting and like a violation of our actual laws in this country. But laws mean nothing to people that want to violate them. Ask anybody that speeds through a school zone. Like, it's just the case. But today, the gift I was gifted was Governor Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis, as I just decided to start calling him now, had to appoint a senator, a United States senator, to the United States Senate because Marco Rubio resigned his post. He's probably going to be Secretary of State. As I've said, as far as all of Trump's picks for cabinet office, I think Marco Rubio is probably the most qualified, and he is underqualified to be Secretary of State, but at least I don't think he's going to destroy that office. And in the world today, we have a good Department of State is going to be a really, really good thing. They basically handle all international affairs and our stage in the world. That's a good thing, for sure. So I'm hoping Marco Rubio does a good job. But he had to resign his seat in the U.S. Senate because he's going to be cabinet official, and you can't be both. DeSantis, although I'm probably right about the Trump thing. So DeSantis appointed Florida's Attorney General. What's her name? Ashley Mood, I think is her name. And in her speech, which I guess she didn't need to give, but everybody expects a speech after an appointment like that, what she said was the following: I am ready to fight for Trump. No applause. No applause. Because a United States senator does not represent only one person. Your job as a United States senator is to do two things. You are supposed to represent your state in an equal-leveled body of the bicameral house of our legislative branch, right? There's 2 senators for every state, so every state gets an equal vote. So you are supposed to advocate for your state. Our senators in New York, Senator Chuck Schumer and Senator Gillibrand, do that all of the time. I am not always fond of the things that they pick, but they do have to represent the constituents of New York, and I feel like they do a good job. Gillibrand probably more so than Schumer, but because Schumer's in a leadership role, his duties tend to fall to the second thing that you're supposed to do as a United States Senator, and that is advocate for the American people. You represent us. Yes, you're not in the House of Representatives, but the Senate is a representative and deliberative body. It is your job to represent the American people as a whole. As a leader and Senate Majority Leader for the past several years, and now Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer is supposed to take a look at the whole and do that, while Gillibrand, the junior senator from New York, does more for New York, and that seems appropriate. Neither one of them are here to represent a single person. That is not their job. In fact, none of the 50 senators in the country are supposed to represent and fight for one individual person. I find this to be absolutely disgusting. But where the red flag comes up, in modern history, less than 100 years ago, in Germany, they had a guy rise to power there who demanded absolute loyalty, not to Germany, to him. They did it in other places too. Stalin famously did it in Russia, and lots of other dictatorships and authoritarian and fascist regimes around the world demand fealty and loyalty just to them. But it famously happened in Germany, and you could tell because the cheers from the House whenever they deliberated was Heil Hitler, to the point where if you didn't say Heil Hitler on the street, you could be arrested for it. It wasn't live long Germany, it wasn't live long and prosper, it was Heil Hitler, right? Like one person. So when you're fighting and advocating for a single person and you aren't a lawyer in a defense trial, you're doing the wrong thing, right? You're absolutely doing the wrong thing as a United States representative. And I find it absolutely disgusting that any sitting representative of us, the people of this great country, would put their loyalty to one person above the rest of us 300 plus million people, especially when we need the help the most. So I'm expecting nothing but nonsense from this chick, from this clam from Florida, that's going to go to the Senate and do basically whatever she's told by her boyfriend. I don't even really know what to think of that. That's just bananas to me that somebody would state that. Like, I understand that you're doing it and you have to kind of kiss the ring and kiss some ass to keep your job so you don't get primaried out. But, like, how about we keep the quiet part quiet and don't say that kind of stuff out loud, because now people start to think that, right? People aren't even Republicans anymore. Like, I mean, there are some, but they're quiet, or they're just quietly leaving public office at all. As you keep seeing with all these resignations, people getting out, famously like Mitt Romney is like, I'm not even going to bother in this place. And I don't remember what senator it was, but he said he wasn't going to run for re-election, or maybe it was a congressman, Republican congressman. Why aren't they? He wasn't going to run, and they were like, why aren't you going to run for office again? He's like, are you seriously asking me that question? Because it makes sense for level-headed Republicans to get out, because Trump and now Elon Musk keep threatening to primary all these people out of a job, and nobody wants to get beat. They'd rather just quit on their own terms, I think. I mean, I don't know. I would. I'd rather just leave on my own terms, which is something like Jack Smith did. He resigned because he knew he was going to get fired. Christopher Wray just tendered his resignation. He leaves effectively Inauguration Day, so he's out, so he won't be fired. And he doesn't want to do any of the stuff that the president-elect wants to do anyway, so it kind of makes sense. But it's certainly better than getting fired. I mean, honestly, I don't know what the unemployment package is. Maybe it is better to get fired, but probably not. But this is the world we're now living in. This is the government that's about to take over. Doesn't that bother you? Doesn't that bother anybody else? I mean, it can't not bother anybody else. I mean, I understand if you didn't think about it that way, but you are declaring loyalty from our deliberative and representative branches to one person, the one person that's now in charge of the free world. He's the head of the executive branch, 1/3 of our government. The second third, the Congress, seems to have no problem offering up that loyalty either. We already know where the Supreme Court stands on most of this stuff. It was a 6-3 decision, although in a very interesting decision, a 5-4 for the side of good, they decided to not push Trump's sentencing in New York by Judge Marchand, which I thought was interesting, but it was good to see that at least there is some line, but it does beg to question why the other 4 were like, oh yeah, you can't sentence President Trump, even though he was convicted in a legal court in New York by his peers. Lots of people argue that it was fixed. That's fine. You can argue it all day long. That's what the appeals process is for, not to throw out a sentencing because a jury decided something. Our country and our Constitution is based on jurisprudence. And I would offer the same advice that MAGA people love to throw out all the time. If you don't like this country, leave. Now, I will tell you, early on in the first Trump administration, I had made a very public statement on social media about how I was troubled by some of the stuff Trump was doing early on. And a friend of mine said something about, this is just, ridiculous. You shouldn't couch what you're saying and stuff like that. And I was like, well, I still have respect for the office. And he said to me, and I'm paraphrasing, this office deserves no more respect anymore. And it's stuck with me since that day, and I have definitely changed my tone. I do not have respect for the office if the office is not respectable anymore. And I feel like the more that laws get violated by the enforcement agency of the government, which is the executive branch. I know most of you didn't take civics in school, but that is one of the jobs of the executive branch. If that is the case and the executive branch decides that laws just aren't important anymore, they do not any longer deserve your respect. So that's my take on it. And my segue, which honestly I think is brilliant, is the dude that said that to me is my very good friend Mike O'Neill, who fought for this country. I think he was a Marine in Afghanistan. So he is somebody who deserves my respect. He is somebody who's standing in life deserves all of our respect. And I'm going to take his word and advice over anything that's coming from the MAGA world. And his band just happens to be one of my favorite bands of all time. That's how we're starting the box today. It's Last Stand for Lucy. Listen up.